Okay. Well, it's a little past noon, so we'll go ahead and get started today. Welcome, everybody. My name is Ben Jewell. I'm a University of Nebraska Extension educator. I'm based in Otoe County, Nebraska, and cover the southeast part of the state for Extension. And today we are here as part of our Market Ready Advanced webinar series. This is sponsored by the Heartland Regional Food Business Center. You can see our partners there on the bottom of the screen there, Center for Rural Affairs, No More Empty Pots, Comunidad Maya Pishani Shim, and the Turtle Island Trade Coalition. Thanks to all of our partners for helping make this happen. So just a quick run through of what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to ask you, if you would, everybody, please in the chat, if you would list your name, where you're located, and something you're excited about in 2025. Just helps us kind of get to know who's in the room and where you're coming from. Got a couple of announcements to make, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mallory Rahe from the University of Missouri to get into the meat of the presentation today. We will have time for Q&A afterwards, and if you can't stay the whole time, we are recording this conversation, this webinar, so we will be posting that on our YouTube page and on the Heartland Center website here in the very near future, and I'll let you all know when that's available. So, as I mentioned, if you could just put in the chat your name, where you're located, something you're excited about in 2025. Doesn't have to be work or farm related, just something that you're looking forward to getting into this year. And then we'll kind of get going here. So just a couple of announcements. I know a lot of folks are really excited for round 2 of the Business Builder Grant. Just wanted to give you a little nod here that we will have more information coming very soon. Sorry, this has taken a little bit of extra time for us to get complete with round 1, but more information coming very soon on when those applications will be open and due dates and all those kind of good things. As I mentioned, this is part of a series of webinars we're doing. So coming up next in February, we've got one on business planning. It's going to be led by a couple of folks from our UNL Ag Economics program, talking about kind of the basics and overview of how to plan for your business financials and stuff like that. In March, we're going to cover basic agricultural bookkeeping. That'll be a really great one. We have a farmer coming to join us, hopefully for that one, as the presenter. April, we'll be looking at grant writing best practices for small farms. Increasingly, grant funds are out there for businesses like your alls, and becomes more and more important to be able to apply successfully for that grant funding. And then we will have one in May that's still being figured out. So more to come on that here soon. I also hello. I just wanted to let you all know, if you weren't aware, we do have the Local Food and Healthy Farms Conference coming up at the end of January. That will be in Nebraska City at the Lead Lodge. Great opportunity to network with other farmers in the state and the region. Got some great keynote speakers, Jay Young from Red Angus Farms, Red Angus, and Jim Kleinschmidt from Other Half Processing. Lots of great sessions, really good information. I encourage you to check out the website and register. And join us in Nebraska City in a couple of weeks. All right, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mallory Rahe. Mallory is an associate extension professor at the University of Missouri. She approaches her work in the area of regional and agricultural economic development with an emphasis on assisting producers or stakeholders that are engaging in on-farm investments or considering public investment options. She provides applied research, data analysis, and trends, and supports strategic decision-making. Mallory, it's all yours.
Thank you, Ben. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. And thank you for sending in all the questions at the time of registration. Those were really useful as I look forward to kind of having this conversation. And we're going to move quickly at times. I do encourage you to put your questions into the chat. I'm trying to save time for questions at the end. If it's something small, like you didn't hear me, or you have a small, clarification, I prefer that you just interrupt me so that let's make sure we're all on the same page. There's a lot of terminology that people have different ways of saying the same thing, and let's just get that out of the way so we can all focus on thinking about how we are pricing products for our small farm and food businesses and what we might want to do differently here in 2025. So There's a lot of different pricing strategies that you may think about doing. And I'm going to briefly walk through some of them. Some of these are easier the more you know about your operation and your own pricing structure. Some of them are more appropriate at different times of your operation and the age of a product and the novelty of a product. One of the most common, and it's the reason we're going to talk about break even today, is a lot of producers, they're looking to establish kind of a known gross margin, or some people say reverse margin pricing or cost plus pricing. And so basically what you want to do is figure out what is my total cost of production or what I think my cost of production will be. And then I want to add like an additional 25, 30% on top of that so that I know I'm going to be profitable and I've got a big enough buffer in case something falls through. I can have some confidence that things will work out okay financially. When we are working in direct to consumer and small scale agriculture, uh, we don't want to think about competing with Walmart, right? Walmart sources a majority of its produce from large farms, at scale farms that are taking advantage of tremendous efficiencies due to their scale. They are not our competitor. If we try to match Walmart prices, we will run ourselves out of business. So the opposite way of thinking about that is just, okay, what can I do on a small scale that's really high quality, that's a really differentiated, a hard to find product. So if everybody is buying, green beans at the grocery store, what kind of novel beans can I offer customers? And knowing that I also have a lot of customer education that I'm going to have to do to kind of help people accept a different bean into their diet, teach them how to use it, store it, eat it, etc. So that's kind of another category where I see producers really trying to say, I don't just have milk, I have A2 milk, right? This is better if you're lactose intolerant. How do I differentiate myself? Several people asked about dynamic pricing in the Q&A, so let's talk about that briefly. This is the idea that you don't just set prices once a year, you may be setting prices once an hour. So farmers do this at farmers markets. They also can do this very easily through online platforms, right? Where you're really able to adjust prices on the fly. And you're doing that for a range of reasons. Again, it kind of depends on your operation, but there's some desire to sort of match demand and or manage inventory. So let's take a farmer's market example. Say you are a produce grower and you've been going to the farmer's market for a while, and you are in an urban area that is sufficiently large enough where you're really able to understand how customers vary throughout that farmer's market 4 to 5 hour window. And you have observed that the people that get there right when the market opens are the most serious people. They're not buying cakes and pastries and wool scarves. They're buying produce. They've come to fill their refrigerator for the week. They know what they're looking for, and they get there early because they want access to the freshest and the best quality of everything you have. They're not interested in showing up at 11 o'clock or noon and getting the picked over leftovers. So could you think about having your highest prices at 8 o'clock or 7:30, whenever your market's opening, 9 o'clock during the winter, and you're slowly lowering those prices throughout the farmer's market window because your customer base is changing for one thing. So you're losing your customers that are most interested in buying produce and are most willing to pay a premium. And also, you're trying to manage your own inventory. You want less to bring home. Maybe you're trying to prevent food spoilage. You don't have another outlet for this stuff. And again, you may not be doing this for every product. That's a lot to manage, but maybe just a few items. Another example is, say that you are bringing a new seasonal flavor to market. You may start at a matched price with your other traditional line and watch the sales. If you see that sales for that seasonal flavor are like outpacing the traditional flavors, 2 to 1, 3 to 1, 4 to 1, you may incrementally raise prices to sort of establish for that market the value of this limited availability, this premium item. Again, I always tell people, I really want people to understand their cost of production so that either by discount, you can understand how far you can go with a discount. And ideally, you're maybe not going below your break-even price, or a little bit below. And similarly, you don't start, if you're doing the work to create a brand new recipe, you're sourcing limited ingredients, maybe you're buying outside ingredients. I really want you to know the value of that product so that you don't just sell all of your jams and jellies at one price. A lot of people, I just had this conversation last weekend at the Great Plains Growers Conference. A woman who made lots of different jams and she was selling them all at the same price. And she said, well, why wouldn't I do that? And everyone in the room was like, well, why would you? You could be losing money on that premium peach jam that is only available in good weather years, et cetera, et cetera. So that is something to think about. Here's a few more. This idea of bundling packages of products. So the more you buy, the more you save. This can be a really good way to move lower value or high volume items. A lot of meat producers will do this in order to move the hamburger, right? So, when you process a beef animal, there's a lot of hamburger and not that many steaks. So how can you use bundles to help move that, control that inventory, but also establish a higher, sales point. Every time you're selling, you're moving a lot of product. And doing bundling effectively means you really need to think about your shopper and what they need and how to make life convenient for them, and really sell those points as you promote the bundle and create the bundle. Competitive pricing. This is for people who they're not really sure what to do. So they look around, they might go to a few different farmers markets. If they're at a large farmers market, they're just scanning the situation. And if tomatoes are going at $3.50 this week, well, that's what I'm going to mark mine at too. And I'm just going to hope it all works out. And it's important that you're price matching similar operations. So again, don't try to price match Walmart, but price matching other small to medium-sized farms, and don't undercut farms too. So even if you find, that you could sell at a lower price, if everyone around you is 50 cents higher, you might just go 50 cents higher. That way you're sort of maintaining relationships among the community and being clearer. Now, if you notice that everyone is selling red tomatoes at $3, but you have heirloom tomatoes, similarly, don't sell those at $3, right? That is a premium product. It justifies a little bit of a higher price because it's different. Psychological pricing, this idea of going just below the dollar, a lot harder to do with farmers markets and cash transactions. And then another idea is this idea of just discounting a product to increase sales, generate sales and increase market share. But as sales increase, so do prices. You see this at large scale companies a lot when they're really trying to, compete with other large competitors. I think a better strategy for small scale producers is to think about offering free samples or bundling recipes with the product as you sell it. But to do other things to really help people try out your product and help them become a repeat customer for you. Okay, that was a really quick overview of pricing strategies. And now we want to take this a little bit farther and then get into break even. So decide what strategy you want, but as you do, you really need to know your customers, their incomes, their product needs. You really need to know your production costs. So we're going to focus on break even today. Somebody had asked about what about egg production, and could you have some egg examples? Eggs, determining the cost of production for a raw product like an egg, use an enterprise budget. That helps you really calculate the cost of growing something or raising something. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can go to Google, type in, egg enterprise budgets, and it pulls up spreadsheets from universities across the US. We don't have one here in Missouri. And producers can kind of dig into assumptions and estimate cost from production. Break even, I think, is great for value added products, and we're going to focus on that today. And then always, do seek out the going rate of products, and we have a segment at the end, we'll talk about that more. So who are your customers? How does your product meet their needs? Think about how often they'll purchase it and how you promote it, how they want to use the product, how important packaging decisions are. There's a lot of customers that are trying to avoid plastics, but plastics are a lot cheaper package than glass. Or people don't want styrofoam either. So how can you use paper or cardboard to replace styrofoam? And for those of you that are really new to this or want to just like quickly do an assessment of the consumer demand for your area, you can go to Intel for Ag, the market intelligence tool, and run a really quick assessment for any address in the whole country. If you want to learn more about market channels, we have a guide sheet for that. I'll package these links and send those to Ben so you'll have them when you get the recording to this webinar. But this is an example of what you can do on the market intelligence report in Intel for Ag. You can type in an address, any address in the country. You can run a slider from 10 miles to 100 miles, and it's going to calculate assessment of the people and the markets in that area. So here I used a location on the edge of St. Louis, and because it's a dense urban area, I wanted my market radius as tight as possible. In rural areas, you're going to want to expand with a larger market area. But within a 10-mile area, this farm could reach over 800,000 potential customers. But there's a really wide range of median household incomes. So the nearest community has a median household income of 28, almost 29,000. The county has an income of 78,000. So this really drives home the importance of know your customer, know what they need, and know what they can afford. You're going to sell very different items to members with households with a median household income of 28 or 29,000 than you would at the 78, 79,000. There's going to be overlap, but those customers are seeking out different products and they have different maximum prices that they're willing to pay. And when a farm is thinking about where to sell, farmers markets, I think, are a great first place. So if you're in Missouri, the tool will also show you the names of the 5 closest farmers markets. If you're out of Missouri, it's easy enough to just Google farmers markets and, you know, kind of look around, but do reach out to those farmers markets because these are often small organizations. They're very hard to manage. Often they're volunteer led and markets can open and close. Before you just selected a market to sell at and paid the yearly dues, go to these, right? Look around, look at your options before you just sign on. Okay, now let's get to break even and really look at what it costs you to produce your product. So here's the formula for break even. We need to know our variable costs per unit as a starting place. And variable cost are the things that change as we change the total volume of our production. There are inputs, there are raw produce, our jars, our labels, and the wages that we use to process, package, distribute that item. We also need to understand our fixed costs. And these are things that don't respond to changes in production volumes. So the cost of having a facility to process, store everything in, the interest we have to pay on loans, insurance, equipment depreciation, and salaries. So here we're talking about administrative employee salaries. So if you're hiring, you know, for accounting services or you need legal assistance, those are just things the business needs, regardless of if you sell anything, right? So, okay. And those of you who have a good sense of what you're already doing, like people may be coming to us from a range of places in their business. Are you now seeing a web portal on the screen, Ben?
Yes, we're seeing it.
Okay, great. So I'm going to share this link in the chat. This is, this will get you right here. And I'm building, today's presentation is really built from this Excel tool, this link right here. So this is free, it's going to download, and if you have the ability to use this, you know, hopefully, please let us know if it's not accessible. So this is kind of what it's going to look like. And we're going to walk through an example today and several questions that came in. I can kind of talk, I'll try to remember to talk about those as we go. So in this example, I'm keeping it very simple. I have one item I'm trying to make. It's sauerkraut. On the first page, I'm going to think very high level. What's my expected sales price per jar of sauerkraut, and how many jars do I expect to sell in the year? So I think this is what I can do. It's a fairly high overall revenue. Now, somebody asked the question, how do I sort of allocate fixed cost across a bunch of different things that are going on in my operation? We built this feature in so that when we look at fixed cost in a minute, if the sauerkraut business is only, you know, 10% of your overall farm, then you would enter sort of 90% here, right? And that's going to pull down those costs. Thank you, BJ. I appreciate that because I was hoping it would just open in Google Sheets, but as I was saying that, I realized I've not actually tried to do that before. So that's something that we can work on. Here's your high level, you know, kind of expectations. Now we're going to go straight to variable costs. And this is where you need to think really hard about your cost of production for that product. You can see I'm starting with cabbages, the raw input. And I have separately worked out that it costs me $1.25 per head to grow this cabbage. And I've used an enterprise budget to do that. And so all of the labor, leasing the ground to grow that cabbage, all of that is embedded in that cost. So I don't want to double count any of that. Here, I want to move forward. So this is like post-harvest, moving forward. What additional cost am I incurring? So for my jar of sauerkraut, it takes a 1-to-1. I take a whole cabbage, and by the time I ferment it, that produces 1 jar. If it was only a half a head of cabbage, then I would put 0.5, and it's lowering the total cost by half, right? Or if it took me 2 cabbages per jar, then it's doubling that cost. So that's how you use the input output. For salt, I buy that by the pound, and I estimated, the amount of tablespoons my recipe calls for, and that equated to 0.04 pounds. So I put that in there. And yes, you may think to yourself, you're getting kind of in the weeds, but all of these things add up. And if you find at the end of the day that your break-even costs are way too high, then that's a good reason to go back to readjust recipes, to readjust production processes, to reevaluate your use of labor, your access to capital. So we want to be as specific as possible here. And I've had people tell me, well, I don't know what a recipe is. Like I just, I make this at a batch at a time, and I taste it, and every batch is a little different. No problem. But the next time you get ready to make a batch, write it down. And whatever a batch ends up being, say you're doing this salsa on your stovetop, if that stock pot generates, 10 jars or 12 jars, write what goes into that, write your output, and factor out the fractions, right? So that you can build this input output. Yes, this is a lot of work. I'm using a very streamlined recipe. I'm not in, and this is hypothetical. I don't actually make sauerkraut. This is not a real recipe. There's no vinegar in here, but it's just for educational purposes. The jar with a lid. So I'm really trying to prioritize glass. I'm buying in small quantities. And so I have a fairly high cost here, but it's a packaging choice that I'm making for my customers. And then I'm also putting a label on that. So again, I document my time when I do one batch of this stuff, and I find out that it takes me about 15 minutes per jar. So I take the total time from when I start post-harvest, I've got the cabbages on the counter, and I'm ready to start chopping. And I document time through when the jars are sealed and, packed back in a box. I want to know how much time that took, and then I'm dividing it by how many jars I created. And I'm assigning a production labor cost of $17.50 per hour. A lot of people are doing this, and they're making it work by not paying themselves anything. And that can work in the short term, maybe even in the medium term. But I really, really encourage you to try to start valuing your time as the business owner, so that one day, if you are ready to scale, you could hire somebody, you could bring somebody else into the business. And before you're ready to do that, even you're understanding that your time has an opportunity cost, right? So that when you look at what you've done at the end of the year, you don't neglect to look at the fact that you dedicated 5,000 hours to this operation, right? Because those were 5,000 hours you could have spent trying something else, or doing something else. So here, I have worked out that my variable costs are $8.08 per jar. Now you saw, I already thought I could sell these for $10. So it's like, oh, gee, there's a lot that's going in just variable cost. If we look at our fixed cost tab, again, for this hypothetical business, so I'm renting out a space to process and do my processing at $275 a month. I'm paying utilities on top of that. My marketing expenses here, I'm just counting for market dues right now. I've got a little bit of advertising. I want to run a newspaper ad. I'm figuring out over the course of a summer, I might have about $400 of supplies that I haven't counted for on variable cost. Uh, Professional fees, insurance, and some taxes. So I come up with this overall overhead of just under 9,000 for this business. So there's math involved, and that initial web page I pointed you to will walk you through all those formulas. You can also come in here and look at all of these things. Everything in gray you can edit yourself, and the white sort of auto calculates. If you ever want to change more, all you have to do is unprotect this page, which protect or unprotect. And then you can get in there and overwrite the formulas. But we try to have it where the formulas will just stay for people who are worried about writing over stuff. So this sheet is going to combine these two things into a single calculation. So attributable fixed costs per unit, this is breaking out that almost $9,000 across the 10,000 units that I project I will sell in the year. And so that comes out to this. And then I'm having the break-even sales price is under $9. And I need to sell, if I have this sales price, I think I can sell 1,300, but this is telling me I need to sell 4,614 to cover my costs, all of my fixed cost and the variable cost on those units. So that I have to at least sell that many to not lose money on the fixed cost side of the business. And I can come over here to this sensitivity analysis tab and look at how profitable, how stable these profits are. So here, this was my assumption, $10 a jar, 13,000 jars. If I do want to start discounting my price and I move it down $1 to $9, but I still manage to sell 13,000, look how dramatically my profits change for this business. I go from 16,000 to 3,000. I'm still profitable, but this is why small producers can get themselves into a lot of trouble very quickly if they listen to pressure from friends and neighbors and start discounting prices without understanding their production costs. And especially if you are trying to produce a really novel product that is expensive, there is a lot of risk involved, you have to trial and error things. Don't let yourself too easily get talked into the idea that nobody will ever pay anything for that, or that's not worth that. Because the people that you are surrounding yourself with, they may not be your target customer, right? My parents, their diet is so different than mine. And anytime we eat meals together, there's a lot of angst on someone's behalf, right? So if I was going to sell a value-added food product, my parents would not be my target customer. And certainly, not their parents who have passed now, but I'm looking for other people who are more like me, people who want to eat weird things and are willing to pay a little bit more for that weird experience. So this shows you where you are. If you don't change your price, but say the farmer's market that you chose, you're having trouble connecting with customers, you're just not moving product. What happens if you sell 10,000 jars less? Well, okay, I'm still profitable. Instead of making 16,000, I'm making 13,000. But what if my sales go down 30%? Well, okay, I'm still profitable. But do you notice that my profits are still so much higher sticking at that $10 a jar than if I drop my price to $9 and sell 30% more? And remember, this is why accounting for labor is so important, because the amount of labor to produce 10,000 jars versus the amount of labor to produce 30% less, 7,000 jars, is really significant. And it's backbreaking work, some of this stuff, hauling stuff around, moving inventory, storing inventory, keeping it safe. Like, so doing this, and I hope I showed you, we spent about 10 minutes on this example. This is how quickly you can start making these decisions for your business. Yes, it's hard. Yes, it's hard to work out recipes and these ratios if you've never done it before. Particularly, people tell me, I have no idea what it costs me to raise cabbage. Okay, you can try to use an enterprise budget and work that out. It does take time. It may require you to go through an entire production year and truly track things. So, you might want to just put in the value of cabbages at the grocery store plus a bit of a markup, right? Because again, you probably can't produce a cabbage exactly what the grocery store, if a grocery store can sell it for 88 cents, I hope I can sell mine, I can grow mine for $1.25. But that is another way to step into this if you're just totally overwhelmed. So look at your raw inputs, mark them up, 50%, and then plug that in for your raw inputs until you better understand your prices. Go through a demo run of your production and take immaculate records. This might require you to hire somebody to stand beside you and write everything down for you so that you can just work, right? The fixed cost, hopefully you have some records, you've got agreements, you've got receipts, and these things are a little bit easier to kind of work out. This is also a great place to play around with the idea of scaling up and, say you want to think about renting out a larger space or you want to buy some bigger equipment. Working out how that's going to change your depreciation and your rent and utilities and maintenance costs are all a really good idea. So, who has questions?
I don't have any specific questions, Mallory, but I would just like to say, sorry, would just like to say that this has been very, very, very beneficial, and I can tell you spent a lot of time on this, and it's very, very much appreciated. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that comment. I love doing this, working with producers. It's been very eye-opening for them. At a workshop last month, a lady realized she was selling below her production cost. And she's like, I was kind of wondering why I wasn't making any money at this. And it's, yeah. But she'd been kind of pricing her products based on what friends and neighbors told her they would buy them for. So, the slides that Ben is gonna hand out really break down the math. And so you can listen to the recording, you can come and look at this stuff more, and kind of see how it all shakes out. Ah, that's right. I knew there was something wrong. I was like, that's too low. That's because I was selling at $10, 13,000 units. Okay, my bad. So that's why it was 68 cents. So you can verify this, right? And I really encourage people to work it out by pen and paper. I'm a huge pen and paper person because it sticks in my head so much better. Then use the spreadsheet when you're trying to do this stuff a lot. So this is how we work out that how many do I have to sell to break even? This is a way to look at breaking out that sensitivity table into your own specifications. If you want to look at not 10, 20, and 30% changes, but you want to work out different changes. This just shows you how to go through all of that, how to get the prices so that you can truly understand your fixed cost at different production volumes. So this also just shows you the break-even revenue. And it drives home this idea that if I tried to price this at just $8.80, whoops, sorry about that, guys. I have to sell 12,000 units to break even. And I only think I'm going to sell 13,000 total. I have given myself extremely thin margins to succeed on this business. But as I incrementally raise that price above my cost structure, I'm breaking even far earlier in the sales season. Sometimes we get crazy hot summers here in the Midwest, or it only rains on Saturdays in the summer. And so if you have your hopes hinged on selling only at a farmer's market, the weather can quickly wash you out. So have a backup plan and maybe I want you to feel very, very comfortable. Once you get these units, so 13,000 units, okay, I need 4,600 to break even. Divide that by the number of Saturdays you want to be at the market, or Sundays or Wednesdays or Fridays, and divide it by the number of hours of that farmer's market so that you can really understand, does this seem realistic? Can I truly move this much volume? Do that before you start, because if you get through a couple of weeks at the farmer's market and you realize, oh my gosh, I am way below projections, then you need to start strategizing with yourself. What can I do differently? How do I, really help engage customers? But again, it's knowing the numbers of your operation. Please value your labor and try to give yourself this, like, what do I want to take home at the end of this enterprise? So we looked at that. Now, here's a little bit of new content. I know we're in the closing minutes here, but don't forget about the cost of marketing. In the break-even tool, we have a very basic way to kind of break out some of these costs. But by working with producers using break-even, we got to this next level of thought. How do I price my product for different markets? Say I've gotten really good at my sauerkraut and now I want to start selling to the grocery store, or I'm interested. What do I charge a grocery store versus a farmer's market? I know I have to give up some of my margin, but also my cost structure for marketing that product is very, very different. And if a lot of people kind of just best guess cost anyway for most things. So if you really want to answer that question for your business, you're going to zero out all of the marketing cost in the break-even tool. Don't account for any marketing at all. And you're going to use our other calculator tool to truly estimate your costs. So here's a hypothetical cost of going to a farmer's market 20 days a year. So I'm paying, I think I'll need, 6 hours of labor. I'm really underselling the labor here. I'm accounting for my mileage, and I'm thinking through like the fee, the county permit I need, my display supplies that I want to pay for, and I'm marketing more than one item. So here I've just allocated 25% of the cost of the supplies to this item. You can play around with a lot of these things. I'm using different percentages to kind of show you how to use things differently, but this is not real. And so here you're going to look at that, and a separate tool will really show you, given your farmer's market marketing cost, given the cost of working with wholesalers and acquiring wholesale accounts, here are your break even and your marketing cost stacked on top of each other, so you can reevaluate your sales, your price that you're going to use. And so that tool can be accessed from the same website I showed earlier, the same tab, and I'll get that to you again in the links. And finally, there's this idea of what's the going rate for similar products. I want to talk briefly about how you find going rates. So USDA AMS collects prices for a lot of farm commodities. These are we're kind of getting out of the value-added space for a second, but I was reminded of the importance of this again at that conference when a flour producer said, we look at these values and we double or triple them when we're selling flowers, because we know that these are prices for large scale farms and we're not. So we're different from them. We have different cost structure. We haven't gone through an enterprise budget, but we use these terminal prices and go from there. It's the same idea of like going to the local grocery store, but these are collected nationally. You can drill down. There are 11 different terminals. St. Louis used to be a terminal. It's no longer. Chicago is still a terminal market for wholesale prices. And there's also retail data. We're working on a tool to make this information easier to click through, but it requires a lot of computing power because it's a Power BI and there's simply thousands of data records. So I'm not going to show you how to use that because it still needs more work. But here's a look at produce auction prices for grade A tomatoes at a Missouri produce auction. So you can see a box of these varied from a high of $81.25 in March down to a low of $8.53 on July 19th. And this really shows you the value of supply and demand, right? Now, these tomatoes in March had much higher production costs. Presumably, they were grown under cover, and there would have needed to be like a heat applied and extra energy costs compared to in July 19th. A lot of these are very likely open field production. So, but just as a reminder. And then what's a jar of sauerkraut worth? So I set my $10. I showed that I could break even. And if I go out and try to price check that, so here is a farm that's offering organic kraut in a plastic resealable pouch. All of these things varied by their sizing, so I'm looking at price per ounce. Okay, but I don't really like plastic. Neither do my customers. So there's a glass jar from a larger scaled company that goes for $9.99, but it's actually only 40 cents per ounce. Okay, I probably am closer to their production costs, but I'm also trying to sell my product in class. Here's where you can drive yourself out of business. Great Value sells this stuff for 5 cents an ounce in a aluminum can, right? So a glass jar of Vlasic is 9 cents an ounce. I know I need at least 51 cents an ounce for what I'm trying to do, but recognize these are not my competitors. So if you find, okay, I'm way too high, what do I do? Look at packaging. It often is a large portion, so is labor, but you may have more flexibility around packaging, especially as you get started. Shopping around for different suppliers, buying inputs in bulk. If you get through a season or two and you really demonstrate to yourself that I can do this, I can sell 10,000 units in a year, it's no big deal, then maybe that gives you the confidence to start buying in bulk. And as you also scale and you find, boy, my labor is really eating up this entire situation, when can I afford to buy a piece of equipment? So, know your customers, factor in the cost of customer education and marketing. The market channel cost assessment tool lets you account for the value of free samples. So how much do I think I'll give out? Let's acknowledge that at the beginning. Let's give it a value and then kind of track how we're going on that value. It's just another way to be very transparent with ourselves about what it takes to do this work. And then always a good idea is finding low-cost ways to test the market. So if you're trying to bring just your first item to market, it really may not make sense for you to have a standalone farmers market booth. Talk to farmers market managers. Some will allow you to co-sign with another vendor and share booth space. Yes, it takes relationships and trust, but does that allow you to kind of try it out before you commit to an entire season? And then just this idea that please try to account for your labor cost. So few final caveats. So we're looking at a year, right? Which means that we want to be careful to appropriately calculate depreciation and the operational cost of processing equipment and capital expenditures so that we're capturing that 1-year use value. But when we look at breaking even, we're also knowing the business may be carrying debt, right? So building in interest payments and breaking even in that year might mean we still have debt. And it may also mean that we have a negative cash flow for several months until we are profitable. So make sure you have enough capital to start your business. And so the rule of thumb for working capital is about $2 of assets for every dollar of liability when you look at the coming year ahead. Track your production records, cost and sales. And if you make these, year-long projections, come back to them, check in, make adjustments, fiddle with your prices, look into bundling or other promotional strategies to get closer to where you think you need to be. A lot of people also, they go through this and they realize this entire thing is unprofitable. I cannot grow red cabbage. For some reason, I've got too many pest pressures. I can't do this on my farm. 10 miles away is a farm that's really good at doing it. People love my red sauerkraut. It is more economical for me to stop production and buy from my neighbor. And we're both winning, right? I'm going to give them a fair price, but I'm going to save my field production for the stuff that I am good at producing. And if I find that nobody buys red cabbage or sauerkraut, but I love it, well, just remember, you are also not your target customer. And so just make the amount for yourself, but move on. Don't lose sight of what your customer really wants. And final slide here is just a plug for Taylor Ann Washburn is joining me today, and she'll be talking more about developing an elevator pitch, creating target customer profiles, and creating best practices for marketing your business online. So I talked a lot about the importance of marketing. If you're totally lost and confused, join us again. Here's the link to register. It's a free webinar. It's in the evening to just come back to this. And I love webinars, and we're just hoping to get information out to as many people as we can. So with that, I've left 5 more minutes for questions. I see there's a whole lot of stuff that's been going on in the chat.
Yeah, there was actually a question from Angela about pricing for wholesale markets, but then you kind of went right into that. I don't know, Angela, if that answered your question or if you had more you wanted to add there. But
to be honest with you, I don't know if I need to if there's anything specifically that could be addressed here. I think there's just a huge, and Ben, you and I've talked about it. There's just this huge void of when a company or a grower is trying to get into the next step higher than just the local grocery store, and they have to start working with a distributor. Many times there's lots of different pricing scenarios that happen. And so that's why I had recommend like maybe there's a part 2 to this that has more of that. These are the things that the charges that you'll have to get into, that you'll have to expect, that you need to figure out, that element of that equation. Did that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, market. I mean, I kind of said that very briefly at the beginning. And what I failed to say is that I'm really focusing on smaller scale and beginning entrepreneurs. Um, and I talk about farmers markets a lot because that's where I see a lot of people that are small scale and starting out going. But it's completely true. Businesses that are already at scale that find farmers markets are way too labor intensive and doesn't fit their personality and what they're trying to do to grow their farm, they pull back, right? And they really go into these wholesale markets, and it is a very different equation.
Yeah, and the few sessions that I've been in person with a variety of different Nebraska economic type of sessions, I'll hear from growers countless times that they're successful on the farm, they're successful on the farmers markets. They just can't take that next step. And it just seems like we just don't have those resources. So I think that's more of my question, was just like, hey, it would be great if you guys could do a part 2. So
Yeah, good point. Other questions or comments? Tiffany says, I totally agree. Next steps and certifications. Yeah, that's, I mean, one of the big hurdles that comes up when you start to get to that wholesale is they might require gap certification. They might require more liability insurance. There's all kinds of additional requirements that come with that as well. So that can really affect your calculation on price. Coming up to the top of the hour here, I wanted to thank Mallory for your time and your expertise here. I love these resources. They're very adaptable to a bunch of different situations. I think that's really valuable. Thank you so much for joining us today and providing this this great webinar on pricing. For those of you on the call, thank you for joining as well. We have recorded this session. We will share that out with all of you who have registered, along with links to these resources and tools that Mallory has shared, and some announcements for upcoming webinars. So appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.